And if you will look at most spray systems, airless, compressed air, doesn't matter what you're talking about, they force the paint particles out of the gun at such a high velocity that a lot of those paint particles bounce off that substrate, and that's what floats away as your overspray.
Mm-hmm.
So turbine systems, because they use that soft, warm air from the turbine, they don't blast the particles out, so they stick to the substrate where you want it to go. And so as a result of that, that's how we eliminate 80 to 90% of your overspray.
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. What's up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, founder of paintergrowth.com, and you're listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. Really exciting episode today, one I've been really looking forward to, and I have John and Jonathan, the two founders of, I guess, John, you'd be the founder of Apollo Sprayers.
Yep, and Jonathan, the future CEO. I guess next generation, right? So I'm second generation, John's third generation, Jonathan's third generation.
Second and third generation, founders of Apollo Sprayers, which is an HVLP spray system that you guys are actual OEMs, American-made OEMs.
Correct. One of the few left.
Absolutely. You're not outsourcing to China or where's your shop? Where's your factory?
We're located in Vista, California, which is about 35 miles north of San Diego. So don't hate on us.
Factory's right there in Vista?
Yeah. Yep. So we have a small warehouse there where we subcontract out all our, so we do all our own R&D. We have engineers that we work with to design our product and so forth. And then we shop that out to various local vendors, depending on what their expertise is and what the part is. And then we bring them into our warehouse and do all the assembly and quality checking right there in Vista. And we ship all over the world.
That's super awesome. I'm very exciting. Now, I want to address the big question, which is, in my painting days, airless was always king, right? You just get a Graco. It's just kind of like, it's just like what you do. You just get a Graco, right? So what are why HVLP? What are the use cases? Just like, let's start there.
Well, so HVLP has come in, obviously it's not been around as long as airless. Airless, is really best suited for spraying large areas with heavy, thick paints. Whereas HVLP turbine systems are really more suited for online fine finish work. So we're not going to replace your airless for spraying walls, or even, if you got 100 doors to spray, you're not going to probably use an HVLP to do that. But if you've got one door to spray or some trim or something like that, then that's where a use case could be made for using the turbine system, because they're way more efficient. And by efficient, we're talking way less paint that's needed. We can spray less material at a time, so we don't have to preload hoses or anything like that. So I can spray as little as an ounce of paint at one time if I want to, and then clean up the equipment is real easy. So it's very portable for on-site work, which is where a lot of contractors are using HVLP.
So you don't have to pump 3/4 of a gallon through the pipes and hoses.
Exactly. So, if you wanted to spray a kitchen island or something like that, you're not going to want to break out your airless system to do that. Mm-hmm. That's where the turbine system can really excel and save time and money.
Okay. Now, I guess with that being said, the turbine systems, HVLPs, they can be used for both the water-based and the solvent-based.
Oh, correct. They can spray, I want to say, almost everything that an airless can spray these days. With the release of the 6-stage turbine motor, we now have the ability to spray those heavy, thick latex paints and 2K polyurethanes that a lot of contractors are doing now, especially cabinet refinishers. Mm-hmm. And so while we can spray a lot of those heavier materials, that's not really what the machine is really best suited for. It's best suited for spraying your fine finish work and in areas where you really need to save and be efficient because of the mess and the overspray.
Okay.
Again, going back to the airless analogy, where it's really designed for spraying large fans, large size walls, and things like that, where they can do it very quickly, and there's no better piece of equipment for that. I think what's happened though over the years is, companies like Graco have, in their endeavor to want to sell more airless machines, they've basically found ways to make them work for other types of finishes as well by, coming out with fine finish tips and all of these other different tips that they have, and low flow sprayers. They can be used to spray fine finishes, but that's like me trying to spray a latex paint on a big wall. I can do it, but it's not the tool of choice. And I think that's where Apollo comes in. We're not going out there and teaching everybody that that HVLP turbine systems is the be all end all to spray systems.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a professional contractor, you need both. And there's times where the airless machine is going to be the better tool for the job. And there's going to be times where the turbine system is going to be the better tool for the job. And so having both is really necessary in my mind.
Mm-hmm. So how does I want two-part question. I mean, number one, how does the HVLP system, how is it more efficient with using paint? And then the second question is, like, I've used it on painting like some railings and staining some railings and stuff, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on process for using one of those sprayers on a full kitchen.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of guys using the turbine systems now, especially with the 6-stage turbine available for spraying 2K polys in kitchens. And they really excel because they reduce the amount of waste, and it's really a huge factor between airless and HVLP turbine systems, because the turbine system is 80 to 90% transfer efficient. And for those people that don't understand that term, when we talk about transfer efficiency, we're talking about how much paint comes out of the spray gun and actually sticks on the substrate which you intend it to, rather than other places and floating away in the atmosphere and everything else. So that wasted paint is the difference between what's is basically the transfer efficiency is what, as we quote it, 80 to 90%. That means that 80 to 90% of the paint that comes out of the spray gun sticks where we want it to, and rather than going elsewhere. And if you compare that to an airless, airless systems are probably about 50%. And so that difference of 30 to 40% makes that much of a difference, and actually translates to, in some cases, bigger savings, because not only do we use, are we able to be more efficient with the way we spray, just as a virtue of the low pressure that we use, but we also have finite controls over the spray gun that you don't have with airless. Airless, you're basically limited to more or less two settings, right? You got your tip, you can change your tip size, which will change your fan and your atomization, or your droplet size, and you've got your pump pressure, and that's about it. And even with the lowest pump pressure, you're still pulling 700 psi of line pressure, right?
And that's assuming you still get a straight spray pattern with low pressure through airless.
Exactly right. Now I know there's low pressure pumps that are coming out, and there's companies like Tritech that do have very good low pressure pumps that work pretty good at lower pressures, but still, I mean, we're talking hundreds of psi, and yes, that's a big difference between thousands of psi. But when we're talking about spraying material with less than 10 psi,
yeah,
there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've used the HVLPs before, which is
HVLP. You had it right.
High volume, low pressure. Yeah. Right. So, and that high volume indicates the air pressure, high volume of air with a low pressure of air, right?
Yeah. So let me explain that real quick then, I guess. Because the high volume, when we talk about high volume, it's not like compressed air, right? So a lot of people are familiar with the high volume of air that you get from a compressed air system. And compressed air spray guns, even an HVLP spray gun on your compressor, only requires typically around 15 CFM, give or take, right? Some are more of an air hog, and some you can get an LVLP or something like that only requires like 5 or 6 CFM. But the turbine system is the exact opposite of that. The turbine itself produces well over 65 CFM of air. And so that's why we have, large diameter air hoses. We're using, 5/8 diameter inside diameter on our or at least 1/2 inch all the way through. So using a 3/8 air hose isn't even good enough, right? We have to have that large air hose. And so the gun is designed also with those large passageways throughout the inside
Mhm.
of the gun. And that's why you can't use a compressed air
Yeah,
gun
if you're
on a
running,
turbine.
I'm just thinking about, yeah, like aerodynamics and physics, right? If you have low pressure, you're just going to need a wider pipe to get the same CFMs through.
Exactly. Yep. It's just, oh, good. There you go. So, John, I don't know if those viewers that are watching, Jonathan's holding up the cutaway version of the spray gun to show you. And so the top passageways that look more like a dark brown color, that's where those are your air passages. So you can see how large that passageway is.
Mhm.
And if you compare that to even an HVLP gun on an air compressor, they're about 1/4 of an inch, right? So
Yep.
less than about around half or a little bit less than half the size of the passageways that are in our gun versus an HVLP compressed air gun. And so what we're doing, as you pointed out, Mike, is we're using that flow more than we are the pressure. And so we get a gentle atomization such that
Yeah.
they don't blast the particles out of the end of the spray gun, so they bounce off the substrate. And if you will look at most spray systems, airless, compressed air, doesn't matter what you're talking about, they force the paint particles out of the gun at such a high velocity that a lot of those paint particles bounce off that substrate, and that's what floats away as your overspray.
Mhm.
So turbine systems, because they use that soft, warm air from the turbine, they don't blast the particles out, so they stick to the substrate where you want it to go. And so as a result of that, that's how we eliminate 80 to 90% of your overspray. So it's not really like magic, but this is a technology that goes back to the early 1960s,
Yeah.
which is where Apollo got its roots. We started in 1966 making these turbine systems. And, as far as the technology goes, it really hasn't changed that much. We used to use the same similar size hoses, the same size guns. What's changed is the manufacturing processes and the ability to put more powerful motors into the system. So, when we started back in the 60s, there was only like what we call a 1 and a 2-stage motor. Now
Yeah.
we have 6-stage motors. So that basically gives you a lot more pressure, right? So a 1-stage motor is going to give you about maybe 1.5 to 2 psi of air pressure, and a 6-stage motor actually gives you about 11.5 psi of sealed air pressure. But when we duct that to the spray gun, the actual spraying pressure at the air cap is only about 7.2 on the max.
Okay. If you see me looking to the side, I'm writing down some questions as you go. I don't want to forget them as they.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fine. I know I'm giving a lot of information out here, and I don't know if we want to get into stages at some point too and explain what we mean by fan stages and all of that, because that's a
Yeah.
very common term that a lot of, all of the manufacturers of turbine systems use. And basically all that means is the level of fans that we have under the electric motor. And the more fans we have, in essence, gives us more pressure. The more pressure we have enables us to be able to spray more thicker paints. And that's really what it comes down to. Thicker paints, and also in some cases higher solids paints too. So the solids content and the thickness of the paint have a lot to do with each other, and they don't always necessarily relate to each other either. So you can have a thin viscosity with a high solids, and that paint will require as much pressure to spray it as a thick paint like a latex or a 2K poly.
Interesting. Okay. This is new for me. So there's one thing I want to get to. Do you want to get to the process that you would recommend someone using one of your sprayers to go through a full kitchen repaint? But before that, I want to talk about like getting started with it and settings. So you said there's a lot more settings involved with HVLP.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why a lot of people are a little bit scared to start.
Yes.
So walk me through the various settings. How do you set them? Is there training available? Like, what do people need to know when setting the settings on their sprayer?
Yeah, so I think that's really honestly the most daunting thing for most contractors coming from airless. And if they haven't used any compressed air spray guns or any other type of air atomizing systems, they're going to have a little bit of a learning curve, but it's really not that difficult. Most of it's just moving the gun a lot closer, only because we're not blasting those particles out of the end of the nozzle like we were before. So now I can, instead of having to hold the gun 12, 18 inches back from where I'm spraying, I can move it to within 4 to 5 inches. And that's kind of the sweet spot. So remembering to be close to where you're spraying is an important point to getting the results with the turbine systems. Most all of your spray guns that are turbine related are going to have that 4 to 6 inch sweet spot, and
Wow.
under very
Much closer
rare
than
circumstances. Sorry.
much closer than airless.
Oh, way closer. Yeah. And I think that's part of the learning curve, is because most guys, like I said, when they come from airless, they're so used to having to be back so far because of the pressure that you're dealing with airless, that they start out and they're, a foot back or maybe 8 or 9 inches. And that's just, you're never going to get good atomization, because what happens then is you're turning up the pressure and you're opening up the fluid to be able to just get something on
You
the
get
job.
splatter.
Exactly. And then you lose the sweet spot. So you end up with more
Yeah.
splatter.
Well, I
which
mean, as a
ends in orange juice.
professional, every professional should go through at least a little bit of training before utilizing a new tool like this on a customer's home.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we suggest, playing around with water. And water is really a good way to learn how manipulate, I should say, your spray gun and now your turbine as well, because our Precision 6 system actually has the ability on the turbine to be able to control your air pressure now to an accuracy of 1/10 of the PSI. So dialing in your air pressure has a lot to do with how efficient you can be. And so, old days, we used to just turn the machine on and what you got was what you got and you dealt with it. So if you had a really thin material, you just had more wasted material. And if you had a thick material, well, then it was, hopefully it was good enough. Otherwise you were thinning it down, right?
Yeah.
Thinning the paint down. Nowadays, with the powerful systems that we have, not all the time do you need to have that full power.
Mhm.
And so a lot of paints will spray with much less than the full power on our Precision 6. And so being able to reduce the pressure on that is a critical portion, a part of becoming more efficient with how you're using your paints. And at the end of the day, it not only results in more profit for you as the painter, because you're not wasting that paint, but you're also going to end up resulting in a lot less cleanup and wasted masking materials and things like that you wouldn't need to have to do, because with airless, everybody knows we got to mask up everything, because with the pressure, it floats around in that room, it gets into every nook and
Yeah, if
cranny.
you can
Right?
see it, it's gonna get overspray on it.
Yeah. Well, I've got customers that will go in and do retouch on a cabinet, or somebody got a ding, or maybe there was a little bit of an imperfection in the work, and they come back in and they can finish that door right inside the customer's home with just a drop cloth on the floor and that. So there's a lot of things that you can do with a turbine system that you can't even think about doing with an HVLP. So there's a lot of time savings when the job is right.
Mhm.
So going back to the controls, so the turbine has the ability to control the pressure finitely, unlike your airless, where you have that max and min, and you can adjust it, 100 psi here and there in between. But for us, we're talking tenths of a psi, which is the most accurate spray system on the planet, and that is a patented feature that's unique to Apollo sprayers. So, and the reason we did that was we were trying to obviously reach the highest level of efficiency that's possible. And turbine systems have always been, noted for their efficiency, but we've found a way to take it to that next level. And so when you dial in your materials, I mean, especially with some of these paints nowadays, when you're talking some of these 2K polys that are $160 or more a gallon, your paint costs have gone up considerably over the old days when they were, $60, $70 a gallon.
Yeah, I mean, even if you can save like three, a third of every gallon you are buying, right?
Oh yeah. And it actually ends up being more than that. I had a customer in Canada who recently was so ecstatic about his circle and where he came. He started with airless, went to HVLP, got frustrated with HVLP, went back to his airless, and then found us and our Precision 6. And he's just been elated with the results that he's getting now. Not only is he getting professional results, but he's cut his material savings by over 70%. So no, he's using like 2 gallons of paint to do an average, a kitchen with like 60 openings, instead of 6 gallons or 8 gallons of paint, which is what he would have been using with his airless.
Wow.
So it does translate into a lot of paint savings. And when people go, oh well, but they're much slower than an airless system. And well, I'll be granted they are a little bit slower, but if you do a time and actually do an honest timing on a door, you're going to spend about 10 seconds longer to spray a door. So if you say, you've got 60 doors, that's what, about 6 minutes or so extra time that you're going to spend on spending on
With like say 3 coats, maybe?
yes, I mean, it depends, right? So I'm talking one coat. So
Okay.
getting on one coat. So most of your 2K polys are going on between usually 4 and 6 mils these days.
Hmm.
And so to get two coats or to get that thickness on that mill build on each level, you're talking about 2 passes on the door, right? So I usually teach people to do a crosshatch.
Yeah.
So for those people that don't know what that means, it means I'm going in different directions, right? So I'm going to spray the door up and down, and then I'm going to spray it side to side. And by cross hatching, it makes sure that I fill in all of the areas, especially when you're doing raised panel doors and ones with some intricacy in them rather than just a flat door. Makes a big difference when you cross hatch. So doing that, and then at least a 50% overlap, and usually depending on the material, can go up to about a 75 or 80% overlap too. And so
Okay.
when you cut down your fan size and you move a little bit closer, and you're doing a 75% overlap, you'll be amazed that you can almost move the gun as fast as you can with an airless.
But do you think 2 coats on average for kitchen cabinets, or with a?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend on what the manufacturer recommends for that particular paint that you're using. So yes, most cases 2 coats, 4 to 6 wet mills is what they're calling for,
Yeah.
to be able to get good coverage on that and have the durability and scratch resistance that the paint is looking for.
I mean, that's still only, factoring in 2 coats, that's only 20 minutes more per kitchen if it's a 60-door kitchen, right?
Right.
And then how about setup and cleanup? Like, how does that compare to an airless?
So depending on how you do it, right? So there's a number of different ways you can paint kitchens, and I have customers that are doing it both ways. The first way is to use a cup on the gun itself, which would be limited to 1 quart size.
And then
And
you
there are
can't really like aim down during that, can you?
yeah,
The
you
cup?
can.
Okay.
Because with the turbine systems, we're using a pressurized system. So
Oh,
the
it
cups are all
pressurizes the actual.
pressurized.
Okay, it doesn't rely on gravity.
Exactly. So we don't have to use a top cup unless you're spraying some of the heavier 2K polys. And then that's where you are forced to basically use a gravity cup with the turbine systems, because even with a pressure cup, they can't pull it from a siphon cup on the bottom. So with some of the heavier 2K polys like Renner and Malaysia, you're going to have to use a gravity cup to spray those. And then you start running into space problems, right? So if you have to spray inside the cabinets, that's where a gravity cup, because you're going to end up with a much bigger footprint of the gun rather than just having a gun with a couple hoses on it, to get inside smaller areas. So if you're just spraying face frames and doors, that's not going to be a problem. But if you've got to start going inside smaller areas, then the gravity cup is going to be an issue on the gun. And that's where some guys decide on the larger jobs, say like a job with say 60 doors or more. That's where having a 2-quart pressure pot is going to tie in really nicely with the turbine system.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you then 2 quarts of material to be able to spray all at one time without stopping. It removes the weight and the size of the cup on the gun. So now you have a gun with a small footprint like an airless gun, but with just 2 hoses on it. So instead of
Less
just
strain
one,
on your hand and wrist.
exactly. So there's less weight there, and your smaller footprint will allow you to bend and twist that into the backs of cabinets and the smaller areas that you might need to get into occasionally. So there is some advantages to having that. The downsides to that would be the cleanup. So now instead of being able to just clean up the gun and a cup, you're having to clean up, say, 30 feet of hose, just like you would with your airless, and clean out a pressure pot. So the cleanup on the pressure pot system is probably very similar to an airless, right? Because you have to flush the pump and flush your airline, or your material line rather, with an airless. And the same thing is happening with the HVLP turbine with the pressure pot, because all your paint's in the pot and in the material hose. So you're going to have to flush out the pot and flush out the material hose.
Yeah.
So about the same cleanup as an airless at that point. And that's why a lot of guys, if they're doing the bigger job, then that's where the time in stopping and refilling the cup versus just having 2 quarts of material to be able to spray without stopping, and having the space and the smaller footprint and the lighter weight that you're holding in your hand are all positives to not really creating any more work than you would with an airless system, but allowing you to still have the efficiency and still have the convenience of that maneuverability into smaller areas.
Yeah. Is there any downside to that 2-quart system?
I mean, in my mind, the only downside really compared to a cup assembly is that you have to clean out the pressure pot and the 30-foot
One
line.
more cleaning step.
Right. But to somebody that's coming from airless or is used to cleaning an airless system, it's not going to be any different. In fact, it might be easier because typically with airless, you're using an 1/8 or 1/4 inch hoses. And with us, we're using 3/8. So 3/8 hoses are a little bit easier to clean. And we use a real high quality air hose, or sorry, material hose that we get from Sames. And they make a real super high flex, real nice quality material hose that's, it's designed to take over 400 psi, but we're putting 20, 25 when you're spraying the 2K poly.
As long as you take care of it and clean it, it's going to last forever.
Yeah, it makes it easy to flush and much easier to take care of, and they last a long time. Again, like you pointed out earlier, we make everything in the States, or everything is real high quality. So nothing with Apollo is going to, it's all designed around contractor use, and so all the parts in our guns are stainless steel. All the air hoses and material hoses we design are all our own design, and have been designed specifically for the use with this type of system. And so they're going to be the best for longevity and durability as well.
Okay. So a couple of things. So number one, so I want to go back to the settings for a minute. So you have pressure you can do per 0.1 of a PSI, which is crazy.
Crazy. And then you got the gun.
And then you got the gun. So what are the other settings that you need to be able to set and dial in order to get a good finish?
Okay, and this is where I think it gets a little bit daunting for a lot of contractors that aren't used to all the variables that you can potentially have with a HVLP turbine system, because we have, just like airless where you can replace the tips, we have various different nozzles and air caps. And those all relate to viscosity and solids content of your materials that you're going to spray.
Is there like a legend, like if you're using this type of product, use this type of tip?
Yeah, so we have in our instruction manual, and we have a very comprehensive manual. It's over 36 pages just for the turbine manual, and then we have another 30-something pages for the spray gun manual. So,
wait, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear.
Yeah, I know, and most guys don't read it.
You have YouTube videos.
We do have YouTube videos as well, and we're always doing more. So yes, and we will continue to do more. So that's one thing about us, if you don't see a video out there that's already out there on something you're looking for to learn about or anything, then email us, and that's something we'll drop into the hat, and we'll make a video for it.
So you mean you don't have like a phone tree where you can never talk to a real human?
Oh yeah, no, we always have that too. And Sally's a great gal. She's always there from 8 to 4 every Monday through Friday. And she's very versed. She's been with us well over 10 years now. And she knows a lot about, not only contractor paints, cabinet refinishing, but, we deal with a lot of variety of different customers, including automotive and other industrial customers that spray tubs and all kinds of different, products. So we really are into a lot of different paints and that. And I feel like we have a wealth of knowledge. So I always encourage our customers to call us anytime they have a problem with a paint or with not knowing the needle and nozzle size or anything. In fact, we make it real easy. We put our phone number right on the handle of the spray gun, so you can't lose it. It's always there. Everybody's got a cell phone on them these days.
So what else you got? Pressure, tip settings.
So we got the tip size, the pressure on the machine. Then we have fan size, so we can adjust the fan size. And then ultimately, we also have the material flow as well. So we can control 3 variables on the gun itself with controls and the nozzle and various different nozzle sizes. So if for spraying very thin materials, if I was doing some stains or lacquers on woodworking, I'm going to use smaller sizes like a 0.8 millimeter and a 1 millimeter for those types of finishes. Then when I start getting into some paints or maybe clear polyurethanes or pre-cat lacquers and things like that, that's where I go up to a 1.3, and then adding pigments goes up to a 1.5. And each time you change your air cap, well, not each time, but there's groups of needles and nozzle sizes that are paired with air caps, so it's fairly intuitive. And this is all put into a table that's in our instruction manual, so it's not like you have to just know this. If you have the manual with you, you can refer to it, and we have that information online, and you can always call Sally as well. But we do a range of needles and nozzle sizes that start at 0.5 millimeter and go all the way up to 2.5 millimeter. And we have a number of different air caps to go with that too, both for low solids and high solids materials. So
Now,
we
are there
really dialed
any?
it in.
Are there any? Yeah, absolutely. Are there any components of the sprayer that are expendable? Like any wear parts?
There's a few. You got your needle bushing and your air valve bushing. There's a few, but I'll be honest, because we're not using the pressure and those the materials we use for making those parts is Delrin and Teflon. They last for a long, long time. So, most guys don't find they're doing a rebuild maybe once a year if they're constantly using the gun.
Okay, if it's like a
But
full-time
yeah,
thing.
those parts just don't wear out. I mean, if you're using a cup gun a lot, then your cup gasket might wear out more often. And then if you're using a traditional cup on the gun, then you have what we call a one-way air valve that basically allows the air to go into the cup and pressurize the cup and prevents the paint from going back up into the spray gun. And that's an expendable part if you don't clean them and forget and the paint dries in it.
Sure.
Really, those are about the only consumable parts in the system, because we make everything, to aircraft tolerances when we machine our parts, and that it doesn't require that we put O-rings on the guns like a lot of other manufacturers have to do. And the reason they have to do that is because they machine their parts to such low tolerances to make them cheap, right? And so I don't know if these guys, if anybody out there knows anything about machining, but you can machine a part in brass versus stainless steel and the cost can be double. And then you can machine a part to, say 5 thousandths of a tolerance versus 10 thousandths of a tolerance, and the part can be double. So how close the tolerance is has a huge effect on the cost of that part. And everything, as I said, we do is called to real close tolerances so that the parts just fit together perfectly every time. And that doesn't need then to have O-rings and other consumable parts on the gun that can go wrong and fail and that have to be replaced.
I once had an old job. I was working in the oil field. This old grouchy guy, he came up to me. I don't know what we were talking about, but he's like, "There's two things you can't trust in this world: engineers and O-rings."
Yeah, because the O-rings will always fail when you don't want them to. That's for sure.
Yeah. Because I'm fairly familiar. I'm a little bit familiar with the Graco Sure Shot, right?
Yep.
The little portable airless sprayer or whatever. And I haven't used one to end of life, but what I've heard is that they're only good for up to about 80 or 100 gallons, and then you basically just need to toss it in the trash.
Right. Well, they're not, it's like the Titan backpack system that they just brought out too. Ultimately, again, those companies are more interested in selling you an airless system than they are building the tool that's right for the job. And while they have HVLP, let's face it, Titan and Graco both put all of their money R&D into replacing and updating their airless equipment every year. And how often do they do that to their turbine systems? Maybe once every 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
I think Titan's going on well over 15 years on their existing line of product. And Graco is probably getting close to about 10 years now with their new line of product that they brought out a while ago. So they don't put the money into HVLP, and really what they're, the Sure Shot is basically Graco's response to the 6-stage turbine that we now have, because they had, they only have a 5-stage, so they don't have the power that's necessary to spray these 2K polys like you can with an airless. And so in order to get the atomization that you need, you really need a 6-stage system. And so their only choice was to come up with a portable little airless. And so let's face it, what we talked about, the two main reasons to use an HVLP was for smaller jobs and smaller quantities of paint that you can spray more efficiently. And so that's what the Sure Shot has basically tried to do, right? It's an airless system that they've made at lower pressures so that it can be more efficient and spray smaller quantities of material. That's why they have a little quart cup that they put on that in the pack. And that's similar to what Titan has recently done with their backpack system. Again, they're trying to close the gap between HVLP and airless and more or less eliminate HVLP in my mind. And that's, so as long as we can continue to keep growing and doing what we can, there's no way that they're even going to come close to HVLP, because even when you introduce compressed air to airless systems and you have the air-assisted airless, which are way more efficient than airless, they're still not even close to the turbine systems. There is nothing even close to.
Can you explain what 6-stage means?
Yeah, so we talked earlier about fan stages. And so 6-stage means that we have 6 levels of fans underneath the electric motor. And each time we drive the air through a fan stage, it boosts the air pressure, kind of similar to a turbo on your car.
Okay.
So what that doing, so the more fan stages we have, the more boost we get. So the 6-stage turbine produces around 72 CFM of air at 11.5 psi of sealed pressure. And what that ultimately means to the painter is that I can spray all those heavy, thick paints that typically we're not able to do very well with a turbine system. Now I can. So even primers and things like that.
Now, forgive me, I'm not an engineer, right? I kind of understand how turbo works on a vehicle, but like, why can't you just run one fan faster? Like, does that just not give you the same level of?
No, it doesn't. So no, so you can create more CFM that way, but the only way to squeeze more pressure out of this type of technology is to add more fan stages. And actually, about 15 years or so ago, the manufacturers that make these motors actually started making them for our type, for basically the blowing side of the motor instead of the sucking side of the motor. So originally, when we first started building these systems, we were using floor care vacuum motors. So they were industrial vacuum motors, which are designed for water lift and sucking dirt and water out of carpet, right? And so they're designed around sucking rather than blowing. And so the exhaust on that was just a way to relieve the back pressure from the suction. We're using the opposite side of that. So we're drawing the air in from ambient, and we're pushing it out the motor at the other end, and we're using that connected to a spray gun to spray with. And so, for a vacuum cleaner, you can get quite a bit of suction out of a small 1-stage or 2-stage motor. But for pressure at the other end, you need to have more fan stages to do that. And you even need to have different shaped fans as well. So we have what's called tapered fans now, which actually boost the pressure. So I have a 3-stage motor that we use nowadays, which gives us about 7.5 psi of sealed air pressure, versus the 3-stage that we used to use 20 years ago, which was made for floor care, that only gave us 5.5 psi of sealed air pressure. So you can see the difference, that even in the same number of fan stages, that even the difference in the tapered fans is made with giving us boosted pressure. And so that's where we've been working closely with these motor manufacturers to develop motors that can give us higher pressures. The downside to that is, as you create more stages and have higher pressures, you create more friction, and with that, more frictional heat. And that's where it becomes really critical on how you manage that heat as to how well the systems work.
Do you need to frequently add oil?
Nope, never add oil to these machines.
Okay.
They're steel bearings, and they have special high temp grease in them that's designed specifically for these machines. And so, nope, they're all sealed. There's nothing you can do as far as maintenance to these machines at all, other than cleaning your filters. And that's the most important thing. Don't run your machine, no matter what brand it is, with a dirty filter, because especially the intake filter, because the intake filter basically is where the air is going to cool the motor, and or one of the intake filters. And that cooling is really important to the motor, along with the size of the case and pushing that air outside the case. So that's why Apollo has designed all of our turbine systems with 26 cooling louvers in them. And it's not because we think they're cool from the 50s and that, but they actually serve a huge purpose in pushing that warm air that ends up inside the case outside into the ambient, so that it's not exasperating the heat on the motor. And that's why you'll notice that if you ran our 6-stage system side by side with the Titan 115, which is the same exact 6-stage motor, that the Titan over time continues to get warmer and warmer and doesn't plateau nearly as fast as the Apollo system. So on those longer spray jobs, what happens is, as you get more heat, you lose pressure. And as you lose pressure, you are fighting then the coating thickness and ultimately your atomization, because you start losing atomization.
Yeah.
So having a stable spraying temperature is equally as important to good finish, because it's going to give you a stable spraying pressure.
And use cycle, like you can run it for 8 hours a day and you're good.
Our systems, yes. Some turbine systems, no. There's systems out there that I would call DIY that have not been designed properly with proper filtration, small cases, and don't have proper bleeds out of them either. So bleeding off the back pressure is a really important part of that. That's why we bleed a lot of the air out of the back of the turbine, because it's a balance with how much air we bleed off from the motor versus how hot the motor gets. And remember, the hotter it gets, the more pressure we lose. So it's a balance between losing pressure through a bleed versus losing pressure through the heat. And, you know, basically to lose the pressure through the bleed is better than the heat, because the heat will ultimately destroy the motor faster than if you keep it cool. So, you know, it's really important not only for the performance of the machine to keep the motor cool, but also for the longevity of that motor too.
Yeah. Okay. So now if someone wants to get started, you know, you go to your website, which is awesome, hvlp.com. And they go to like the wood commercial spray systems and parts. What type of package should someone be buying if they just want to get started, like to make sure that they have everything that they need?
So for, you know, most painting contractors that are out there, most of you guys are spraying, you know, latex paints, a lot of the new cabinet paints, which are generally polys, whether it's a 1K or a 2K, really doesn't make much of a difference. So really selecting the material and knowing what you're going to paint is really, or what you're going to use for paint is really important when you're selecting the right machine. Because if you select a machine that doesn't have enough power, you can't increase the power beyond what the max pressure is, right? So I always encourage people overbuy. So in other words, for most contractors, since really the only two real viable levels of systems that you can use for most of the work that you guys are going to do is a 5 and a 6 stage turbine, which is going to give you between 10 and 11 or so PSI of pressure.
Okay.
Go for the 6 stage, because honestly, that's going to give you a lot more ability to be able to not only adjust your pressure, but spraying all those different finishes by being able to adjust that pressure. And more importantly, you can always adjust down, but you can't adjust up. So making sure that you have enough pressure to spray the heaviest finishes that you're going to spray, right? So your latex paints, your 2K polys are usually typically the heaviest of paints, maybe some primers, those kinds of things. And if you cover that, you can always spray the thinner stuff with no problem. So that Precision 6 will actually spray virtually any type of paint out there.
This second one, would you say?
All that page that you're showing right now is actually all Precision 6 models.
Okay.
What you're seeing the difference is, and we talked about the 2-quart pressure pot system. So the top row there on the right, the second one over on there, yeah, that one, that's our 2-quart pressure pot system. So that's the Precision 6 with the 2-quart pot and all of the accessories that you need to be able to spray cabinets straight out of a 2-quart pressure pot. Okay. And that will come with a couple of different needles and nozzles and an air cap set, so that you have all of the right sizes and nozzles for refinishing cabinets. And that's kind of what we've put that system together for.
Okay, so if you're doing a lot of 2K or like heavier products, you want a gravity feed?
Yeah, you definitely need either gravity feed or a pressure pot, one of the two. If you're going to use
gravity or bottom,
you got to use gravity. So our systems are set up so that you can get both. So like with that setup, you've got the turbine system, which has the air compressor and the 2-quart pressure pot mounted to the top. And then we have the spray gun, which you can either use with the 2-quart pressure pot, or if you choose to do a smaller job, you can just attach the cup onto the gun and use the system without the pressure pot and just do a touch up or an island or something like that using the cup gun.
So what actually I think I recommend is, if anyone wants to know what sprayer they have, they should just give you guys a call.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's where Sally's expertise is, right? And that's what she does all day long. She talks to you guys, and she'll listen to you, and you'll tell her what you want to be able to do and what kinds of jobs you do, and she'll be able to recommend the appropriate system for you.
And so it looks like there is financing with a firm, but on average, it's about like $3 to $4 grand to get into the HVLP game.
And yeah, you can get into, depending on, if, again, this is with the 6 stage and the 2-quart pressure pot. And so it's kind of all the bells and whistles. But if you wanted to just get wet and start slow, you can start with a 5 stage system, which will still spray a lot of your 2K polys. And you can do that with a cup gun, and you can get in for as little as $1,649.
Okay.
So you can and that will allow you, and that's the nice thing about our systems. You don't have to buy the 2-quart pressure pot setup to move into that later. Everything that we build is modular. So you can buy the basic Power 5 VS system for $1649, which will come with a cup gun, and you can choose the gravity feed cup, and you can spray your 2K polys with that system very nicely. And then if you decide that you want to buy the 2-quart pressure pot setup, you can buy that and build it right onto your Power 5 VS, and it would be no different than if you purchased the system directly with that setup from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it's easily versatile back and forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, so not necessarily got to jump in with, with $3,500. If you want all the bells and whistles and you want the top of the line and you want all the needles and nozzles, then yeah, that's about where you're going to be at $3,400. But
I
if
mean,
you
just
don't,
doing the math, if you do 2 kitchens a month, it'll pay for itself pretty quick.
yeah, with most of your paints these days, our customer that I was referring to earlier told me he was saving on average about $1,600 on every job that he was doing. So, yeah, I mean, 2, maybe 3 jobs, and you've just in the paint savings, right? And that doesn't account
Wow.
for your time and the paper and all the other necessary cleanup that's necessary with the airless versus what the turbine produces. So it is very significant. And with times not being easy right now, it's not like it was a few years ago where, guys were turning away work because they were so busy. So, being efficient and getting the most profit out of every job is really important these days. So, it's a real big consideration to go back to an HVLP system if you're using an airless, because that is a quick way to put money right back in your family's pocket.
It's a lot of money. You could
Yeah.
buy a new sprayer every kitchen. By the end of the year, you have like 100 sprayers.
Almost. Yeah. Right.
Sure.
And you look at that. I mean, and we warranty our systems for as little as 2 years and as much as 5 years. So,
Yeah.
and we stand behind our products. So we give excellent customer service. And if you have any problems with your system, we take care of it right away.
I don't doubt that. And then 2 more questions here before we jump for the day. First is, where do you recommend people go in terms of like training course to learn how to use an HVLP?
Well, that's the hardest thing, right? So I have, depending on exactly what you want to do, but if you're looking at doing, cabinet refinishing, which is most of what I think our audience these days would be using the turbine system for, there is an outlet we have in Texas where you can get training. There's a couple places there, and I can give you some links if you want to add to the podcast. We can do that. And then, I think probably most of your audience must be familiar with Chris, the Idaho painter. And he's actually just done an entire cabinet refinishing course, which you can take online, and features our Precision 6. And not only for refinishing cabinetry, but he's also done a separate furniture flipping course too. So you can use the same 2K polys that you're spraying on the kitchen cabinets for your customers to flip furniture as well on the side, kind of thing. And that same spray system, guys are using in their garage on the weekends to flip furniture. So he's got 2 courses, which are awesome. I highly recommend those. He's just got them out. And again, they feature our Precision 6 in there. He goes through all of the setup, needles and nozzles, how to use it, set the pressure, the gun, everything. And it's all available online. So you don't have to fly out and go and attend a course for that. Whereas the courses that I was talking about in Houston would be something that you would have to spend a day or 2 and fly out and spend, but that's going to be hands-on in a shop.
Obviously better
Spraying material. Yeah. I mean, there's 2 different levels, right? So it really just depends on how much time you want to invest in it. But I know that a lot of the customers that have spent the time to go out to Texas and take the courses are really happy that they did, because obviously it takes a huge part of the learning curve out.
And then I saw on your website that y'all are doing a Black Friday sale. It's coming up pretty soon.
Huge Black Friday sale. Yeah. It's already started. It's already started. So to find out about that and to get the lowdown on the coupon codes, because it's only available through special coupon codes. So if you go to our website, like we just did, you're going to see $3,451, I think it is, for that 2-quart Precision 6 system. But we've got a $500 coupon right now that you guys can take advantage of, and free shipping. So sign up for our newsletter, and that will ensure that you get the coupon code. So all I got to do is go to our website at hvlp.com, After they've been on that site for about 2 or 3 seconds, a little pop-up will pop up on their thing to sign up for the newsletter. So have that. If they've got pop-ups blocked and it doesn't come up, they can go to the bottom of the page, and there's a link there as well to sign up for our newsletter. So make sure they do that. That keeps us in the loop, and they will know about every sale and every promotion that we do. And this is, I got to say, the biggest promotion we've ever done on our equipment. So
that is very
take advantage of it. It's good now through December 3rd.
December 3rd. Okay. Sounds good. So we'll put the details of that below this podcast. So if you want to just check out the data below this, you can get it on this Black Friday deal. Save $500. It's a good deal.
Don't miss out on that one. If you're thinking about going back to HVLP, now is the time. Don't hesitate.
Awesome. Well, hey, I learned a ton today. I've been meaning to do a little bit of research on HVLPs to be a little more knowledgeable on it. And what better way to do that than from the source themselves?
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to have us on today, Mike. And, feel free to reach out to us if anybody has any questions. Again, Sally's in our office and customer service, and she's awesome. She knows so much about our product, and she's really a wealth and encyclopedia of knowledge.
We'll make sure that phone number gets there below as well.
Very good.
Even if you don't get that phone number, you can reach out. I take care of all the social media and stuff, so reach out that way. I'm quick to respond. I try to respond on the weekends and stuff as well. So if you have any questions, I can also help you with that, help you dial in your system, help you with coding, stuff like that as well.
So we're all here for you.
Love
and
it.
That's, we say when you buy an Apollo, you join our family, and we really mean it. You're part of our family, and we care about each and every one of our customers, and we always encouraging them to call us. We do trade shows and all of that. So, we're out at PCA every year. So I hope to see you guys, some of you maybe out at the PCA event coming up in Colorado Springs next year.
I will be there.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you there, Mike, and hopefully a lot of other of our listeners as well.
And we might try to catch you next week when I'm down in San Diego.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.